Steffan. Steffan, you are now on the air. What's going on tonight?
Holy crap, hi.
Hey, what can we do for you?
Hi. Well, I heard you guys talking about how everybody started in religion and recovering from religion.
Mm-hmm.
My backstory, I was a Christian, like Jehovah's Witness, unfortunately, first, and then a Free Will Baptist or whatever the hell my mom was. And it wasn't until I met my ex-fiance, Ashley, that she made me actually start to question everything. And it wasn't until, I think, about a little over a year ago that I actually started questioning things and thinking, well, this isn't right. And then actually I started watching the Atheist Experience, especially with you, Matt, you, Mr. Dillahunty, and it was like a super huge eye-opener. And the more I watched, the more I kind of figured, okay, so my questions are correct. And my fiance, my current fiance right now, she is an agnostic theist. And the one part that she's having trouble with is the whole, how can everything be without a God? How can everything have been created by a God? And trying to explain to her, well, it's evolution, it's cells reproducing, and just trying to remember all the basic biology, which I sucked at biology. But yeah, recovering from all that crap. It's just, there are a lot of times whenever I still question, like, oh shit, what if there is one? But then I have to remind myself, okay, well, if there is one, then all this crap that I've been saying, because I've gotten into debates with a couple of a lot of my family members, and I've talked shit on quote unquote God. I've questioned them. It's like, okay, if there was really a God, then wouldn't he be stopping me? Wouldn't he been doing this? And then
yeah, you're blaspheming. I mean, you're really asking for it. You know?
Exactly. I mean, I've called this imaginary friend that they have in the sky every fucking name I can think of in the book, and yet nothing happens. And it's like, okay, if your God is really real and he doesn't like that kind of stuff, then why hasn't he done anything to hurt me? Why hasn't he done anything to stop me? What the hell is going on? I mean, again, either he's that fucking weak, or just something else. And it's hard to demonstrate that to other people. And then whenever they ask these questions, like I had a debate with my own dad about it, and there were a couple things that came up that I unfortunately could not remember how to get through. And again, there are times whenever I'm at work and I'm listening to the Atheist Experience, like past episodes, and it's like, okay, I can remember this, but then again, there's this question, trying to be as skeptical as possible, but then again, we don't freaking know. And the possibility of ever being able to know whether or not there's actually a true God, I don't feel like that's even possible to figure out, even though I'm pretty sure there's not one. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Well, in the context of this show, God can't give evidence that he exists, because then you'd know he exists. And when you catch a peeping Tom, it's really hard for them to keep peeping.
Right? Yeah. I mean, from everything you're saying, it to me sounds sort of like that Dillahunty gumball question. You know, it's this idea of, as skeptics, I can't categorically prove that there is no God. But there's no reason to believe that there is one. And I can say from personal experience and seeing so many other people's, how much easier life can be when you disabuse yourself of the notion that this is the God, that this, construct that was created some 2,000-3,000 years ago is the only God and who you should be obeying and reading about and learning from. And the proof is in the pudding in a lot of ways. If that God was real, man, he's an asshole in so many ways, because if you're following those instructions, following those rules, it's pretty miserable.
Steffan, if I could ask, and plead the fifth if you want, I don't want to push this, what kind of sexuality was pushed on you by your religious training and background?
Well, it wasn't... My background isn't exactly. I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it's funny because my mom. Whenever I first told my mom that, hey, I was ready to lose my virginity, she was the one that bawled her eyes out, like, oh my God, my baby's doing this and blah blah blah. And I kind of thought, okay, whatever. But my dad, on the other hand, he. I'll never forget these words. He said, "Don't fall in love with the first pussy that you find," which. Now that I think about it, I like, wow, way to put it. But
it's a lot to unpack there.
That was.
Well, Jehovah's Witnesses can be pretty difficult when it comes to sexuality. So you mentioned Jehovah's Witnesses. I was kind of wondering what. Are you familiar with some of the ex-Jehovah's Witness resources that we have on our website, recoverfromreligion.org?
No, unfortunately I have not been able to.
Well, would you consider yourself an ex-Jehovah's Witness or not?
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, you do make some interesting points, in this notion of, well, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, I can't know, whatever else. But it is a curious thing that if there is a God, I didn't choose, and have never chosen, any aspect of my sexuality. I'm attracted to what I'm attracted to for reasons that are beyond my comprehension. And so if there's a God that really has rules against whatever the hell I might be into, you're right. Why hasn't he acted? And if either there is no God or he doesn't care or he's peeping. And, for somebody who's really convinced, I'll just go with, God watches you masturbate and evidently isn't too bothered by it. He hasn't done anything. Didn't make hair grow on my palm or anything.
Nobody's gone blind. Yeah.
Yep.
I just wear glasses, but I notice you do too.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going blind, but it's for unrelated reasons.
Right. And it's one of those things, like I said, because my dad, my stepmom, my stepdad, and my actual biological mother, they're all religious. One side more religious than the other, and of course, my dad, he's got a big problem with the whole transsexual group, the transgenders and all that, and he made the statement once that, now that they're doing this, they just want to get into the bathroom. They want to get into, the opposite sex bathroom. And he said, if I'm correct on this quote, he said, I don't want a woman who used to be a man going into the same bathroom with my daughter. And I thought, okay, I was thinking about that today, and I thought, okay, I'm sorry, but I don't know any transgenders really at all, any transgender people or transsexual people, but I'm pretty damn sure that maybe there are some that think like that, but as many as far as I can tell, there aren't any that would do that because they have a better moral compass than that. And I feel like the biggest reason why my dad is saying that is just because, of course, his little holy book says, oh, well, transgenders, anybody who's gay or blah, 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 blah.
Male and female, he created
it's worse than that.
All of that.
It is, he's unable to see things from any perspective other than his own experience. Mm-hmm. And so if he views trans women as if they're men secretly pretending, then he has to put it in that context in his head and say, if I was secretly pretending, what would my motivation be and what would I be doing? And so he's projecting all of the things that he's afraid he might do onto people who have no interest in doing it. They just want to go in and pee.
And you have to realize that if there was an incident of a trans woman going into a public restroom and assaulting a young girl, that it would be all over the news constantly.
You mean like priests?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
Look, anybody can be an asshole. I'm not saying that any particular group is full of assholes. I'm just saying that an asshole can come from anywhere. So by that definition, I'm confident that there are trans folks that are just miserable to be around. However, there are constantly trans women being attacked, brutalized. We've had
even murdered.
4 different trans women murdered in the city of Dallas this year in the last 6 months. We're midway through June. People in that population are incredibly vulnerable and constantly victimized, and we're barely talking about it. And yet, if there was a single incident like the hypothetical that your dad is describing, you better believe it would be on the front page of every news site over and over and over again. I mean, Sean Hannity would not let us forget that it happened. So it's not happening, at least not in any kind of statistically significant, meaningful way. I mean, one person being assaulted is a problem. One person assaulted is way too many, but there's just no validity to that claim. There's no data. There's no reason to think that that's happening.
Yeah, and actually, just the other day, there's a Facebook forum that I was loosely associated with, and it will be again. And there was a post where someone basically said that they were complaining about kids at Pride festivals, and I was like, if they're too young to understand, then they don't understand, and if they're old enough to understand, then they understand. And so, it's not like people were actually having sex or whatever else. Plus,
well, and it's presumptive of the idea that pride or being gay or having a gay identity is sexual in nature.
Well, if there's a dude in a thong and nothing else, they were like, oh my gosh, how can you have that in front of kids? And I'm like, you don't think kids see their parents walk around in their underwear and stuff like that on occasion? But what they did was the original poster created this incredibly, just plucked it right out of his ass connection between the LGBT community and pedophilia, and used this as a sensational thing. And he was like, well, it's just logical that, this would lead to pedophilia. And I was like, and an apologist friend of mine jumped in to claim that, it was reasonable to suggest that there was a connection between pedophilia and I was like, I don't have time to give you guys a lecture right now, but if this is the kind of stuff, the kind of outrageous slander that's going to happen on this page, I'm leaving. And I left. The post got taken down. But what I would have written, if there had been time and interest, is that, first of all, pedophilia is not the problem, because that's about what you're attracted to, and you didn't choose that. There are plenty of pedophiles who never act on it because they have a moral compass that permits them to do that. It doesn't change whether or not they're attracted to it. The problem is pederasty. The problem is child rape. The problem is all of these things. And where is it happening? It's not happening in the LGBTQ community, according to any data I've seen, at any rate greater than it is anywhere else. As Christy was saying, anybody can be an asshole, and anybody can be an abuser, and anybody, you have no idea or no way of knowing that because somebody has this kink or this preference or whatever else, that they're, you view that as deviant, and so you apply all these other things on them that are deviant as well. And that's just not the case. And so I'd like to see everybody start talking about the difference between pedophilia, what you're attracted to, and then the actions you take on behalf of it, making that distinction.
Right. And I hope this doesn't come off as bias or anything, but to add on a little bit with what you just said, I feel like a lot of times whenever people make that assumption, it's like I feel like they're going mostly off their book. Like the people that I've heard in general are going off their holy book. Like the transgender community, the transsexual community, that they're going basically off their book. And it's just like my stepmother said her cousin apparently was dying of AIDS or something like that, and her cousin happened to be gay. And I thought, okay, is that completely true, or are you just saying that because you're religious and because of all this bullshit that has been said? You can't go off of that. You can't go off of the book. I mean, these people haven't done anything wrong, and it's like I think I talked about. I think either last week or the week before with that community. Stop. There's no use going after them. They're not doing anything wrong. They just want to be happy. They're not going after other people like I feel religion does. They're not going after other people. They're just trying to get the same rights that everybody else has. And everybody, there are a lot of people that, come after them and say, no, this isn't right because it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. It's like, you know what? No, fuck you. No, this is not how it's supposed to go. They're not doing anything wrong to you. They, like you said, they can't help who they're attracted to. And as long as you teach your kids, these guys, as long as they're not hurting anybody, they're fine. These people that are coming out as gay, lesbian, or anything, they're not hurting anybody. They can't help with who they're attracted to, and there's nothing wrong with it. So, you don't have to be afraid of them. And with all these other people, just leave them the fuck alone. It's that simple, but they can't get that through their thick head. And it annoys the holy shit out of me. And I've had countless family members who have done the exact same thing, getting onto that community and countless others, and it's just, delete you off of Facebook and all that. But I just, half the time I don't know how to convince them. I don't know how to tell them, what you're saying, it doesn't make any logical sense. And half the time, like I said, they're going off their own religious beliefs, and I don't know what to do. So, but yeah, that's my predicament.
It's not based on morality so much as fear. And I do appreciate you calling in. I'd like to ask Darrel specifically a little bit more about just why the queer community in particular seems targeted by religion. And is it because coincidentally these books 2,000 years ago happened to include these phrases, or is there really more to it than that? So, Steffan, I do really appreciate you calling in. I'm going to go ahead and jump on some other calls and give Darrel a chance to answer that, if that's all right.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, and you guys are doing awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
I don't know. The target, I think women have been targeted from very beginning of all the patriarchal religions, for sure. Excuse me a second.
I believe that. And that makes a certain kind of sense if we see religion as an opportunity to, I guess, just further these ideas of agriculture and passing lineage on. And now there's possession, and there's all, the economy is growing up, and we have to figure out a way to manage all of that, not to get, too heady into the evolution of human culture. But I think that's a big part of it. It makes sense that subjugating women, I don't want to say necessary, but was a means to an end in just maintaining that economy.
Right. And so by extension, if you follow my logic a little bit here, women were targeted especially if they were not reproducing in the appropriate way. So with the appropriate person, because the lineage, like you mentioned, was important. So then you move that one step away, and people in the LGBTQ community are not reproducing in the appropriate way either. And they're not following the narrative that allows for the primogenitor of male dominance in the hierarchy. So they're violating one of the fundamental assumptions of all the major patriarchal religions.
And you can't have a patriarchy if you have these folks who don't need men, or who don't need to pass on, to children.
But I want to point out the pattern is not just Christian, it's not just Muslim, it's not just Hindu. Hindu's very patriarchal. In fact, India is like the 159th most dangerous place on the planet for women, but also Buddhism. Buddhism's incredibly patriarchal, and it's also very abusive to children. If you just look at the number of children who are being virtually incarcerated for life inside of a monastery, mainly boys in certain parts of Thailand and Tibet. So to step outside of the narrative that makes for the male dominance is going to get you targeted among the patriarchal religions. So what I think is important that's happening right now, and I love it. I love what's happening, although we've got a ton of work to do, is that we're stepping away from the patriarchal narrative, and we're saying, in order to be a fully accepted member of our culture, you do not have to follow this narrative. You can follow your own narrative, and that's new, and it started. I mean, we could say it probably started most strongly at Stonewall. I mean, we're in Pride Month right now, so Stonewall would be a marker for that. Sure. But you could also go back and look in the convention of 1849 in New York, upstate New York, when women said we want the vote, and you start with Margaret Sanger and birth control and all those things. Those were all steps to move away from the patriarchy, very small ones, and we don't realize how scary. You talked about you putting a filter up. Imagine what Margaret Sanger had to do when she could get beat up and put in prison or killed, and some women were killed for just asking for the vote. So I think that's kind of my answer to your question. It's broader than just LGBTQ. I think we need to understand the context of how this culture tries to impose a male-dominated viewpoint.
Yeah,
on
anything
everybody.
that threatens the idea that a child-producing man accumulates wealth and then gives that to his son. Anything that goes against that concept, whether it's birth control or women having their own resources, their own property, or just anybody who's not wanting to reproduce is threatening to that system.
And then there's another thing. I wrote an article. I actually have a YouTube video on this called "Male Shame," and I talk about our culture shames men for not behaving in a certain way, and it's a part of this whole male dominance narrative. If you don't behave in a certain way, you don't talk a certain way, if you don't engage in certain activities and hobbies, and you must not be fully man. And then we got this whole list of pejorative terms that our culture. I learned them all when I was in 8th grade in gym class. And the boys will call each other all sorts of names because they caught a boy masturbating, or they caught a boy looking at another boy's penis, or you name it. There's all sorts of ways to try and it tries to force identity upon boys at very, very young age. And I think we suffer from this now because men in our culture are now feel like they've got to act in a certain way, and if a woman acts a certain way, it's a shame on the man. We've got this idea that men should control their women.
Yep.
It comes right out of Christianity, it comes right out of Islam, comes right out of Judaism. If a man does not control his women, then he's less of a man, and he is shamed.
Again, he doesn't have his household in order. He can't pass on his line. It's all about that idea of lineage.
Exactly.
That's how you get to the honor killings and things like that. You've
Exactly.
shamed our family. No, you just did. The second you had that thought, uttered it, and then tried to take action against somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.